Stories have power. They're a method that we use to make sense of complex ideas and to help shape public discourse. So in the last 200 years, we've told ourselves a story about our relationship with nature that is fundamentally different than what came before. Instead of a relationship of mutual interdependence, we told ourselves that nature was ours to exploit. And this story has caused some challenges for ourselves. We told ourselves that the Earth, the atmosphere, had unlimited carrying capacity to handle all the CO2 that we burned. And in the process, we created climate change. We told ourselves that water was a nuisance that carried disease. So we paved over all of the soft surfaces and sent it away as quickly as possible. And we did the same with our products that we manufactured. We created consumable and disposable products that we threw away somewhere else because the world was big enough to handle all of our trash. So if this is the story that we told ourselves that's caused these troubles, maybe it's time to start telling a new story. One about a relationship with nature that is not about domination and exploitation, but as a mentor that we can learn from. So that we can create buildings, communities, and cities that perform at least as well as the ecosystems they inhabit. Because after all, life that lives in these ecosystems has had millennia to adapt to these constraints and abundances, and they've used them as an opportunity to thrive. And we can too, when we start telling new stories. So this is a story of a raindrop that falls in two very different places, a forest and a city. And by comparing and contrasting these built versus native environments, we can start to understand and articulate the challenges that we're facing and start to shape a public discourse that is more about understanding nature and learning from her. So a raindrop starts in the sky. It falls fast and hard on the top of a leaf of a forest canopy, and it breaks apart and it slows down. It hits another leaf lower, it breaks apart and slows down. It hits another leaf and on, understory trees, ground cover. So by the time it reaches its final destination, it's either landing on the leaf to be evaporated up into the sky, or it falls into the spongy soil architecture to be absorbed and nourish the tree and released into the sky once more. So in a forest ecosystem, this process of breaking apart and slowing down the flow of water serves to feed the ecosystem. But this is a very different story from what happens to that same raindrop that falls in a city. Instead of falling on multiple surfaces and breaking apart and slowing down, it hits a roof or a street. It lands hard, and then instead of breaking apart and slowing down, it accelerates and aggregates so that it's going faster and faster through gutters and downspouts and curbs, picking up everything that it encounters on the way. Leaves, trash, chemicals, topsoil, garbage, everything, washing it all away until it hits a river and eventually the ocean. It has fed no one, it has polluted the water, and it's drained the fertility of the soil. Water left on a site feeds an ecosystem, but water lost to runoff feeds no one. So if we tell ourselves the story of the raindrop, both in the city and in a native ecosystem, we can start to understand how to compare and contrast. So in the process of how we've handled water, which has created these challenges, ecosystems actually perform these functions and create services, not just for themselves, but for the entire ecosystem, and creating conditions conducive to life. So understanding how ecosystems perform these, we can start to create benchmarks for our own cities so that they can perform at least as well as the ecosystems they inhabit, so that we can have built environments that slow the water over large structures, even skyscrapers, and create multi-layered surfaces on facades and roofs that slow the flow of water and hold it for a time period. And pedestrian canopies that do the same, so that we can create this evaporative potential that allows for a lower ambient temperature in our environments, lessening heat island effect. And water is a great place to start, but we can't stop there. We can start to create energy services like ecosystems do. So in the process of creating energy, we create, instead of pollution and releasing carbon, we actually are able to absorb pollution and sequester carbon. We can look to our food systems, which currently are centralized and chemically dependent and very fragile, to one of richness, of perennial polyculture, like the Land Institute advocates for. We can create waste, or we can handle our waste and our materials instead of the take, make, waste paradigm we've been under, to a natural paradigm, how nature handles, where waste is truly food for another organism. And all of these strategies help ecosystems and the organisms that inhabit them to pass the ultimate test of any system, its survival over time. So by learning from nature's strategies, we can fundamentally rethink our own and stop propping up brittle systems and start developing and embedding the ability to adapt as conditions change. And this integration of ecology and design is the way that we can learn the lessons of green infrastructure to really help influence our so-called gray infrastructure, so that we can use our most abundant resource, human cleverness, toward the betterment of our own cities, buildings, and communities, and also embody the beauty that's inherent in natural systems. So this goal is what our thesis for the Prairie Project. Biomimicry Chicago is in the process of developing this bold new initiative that will create experiences that help inhabitants experience and reconnect with our native ecosystems. We're going to tell stories to help us relearn the wisdom of our ancestors. And we're going to create tools and guidelines to help us rethink the decisions that we make for a greater context. So by designing to nature standards, in this process of igniting the imagination, as well as creating benchmarks and metrics to measure our success, we can start to create buildings, communities, and cities that emulate life at the deepest level, where they create conditions conducive to more life. So join us. We're going to have a kickoff event this October. We're going to bring together a diverse group of individuals and organizations, and we're going to explore the Lurie Garden, learn about ecosystem services and biomimicry as it relates to the built environment, and really start a conversation about what this means for our Chicago region. So connect with us today. Tell us your stories of your place, where you live, where you work, where you have fun, and what you think we can learn from each other and from nature by sharing them.